Bro, I just got off a call with my mom and she was talking about how she booked like a temple appointment and I already went to the temple this morning, but because she has no respect for my time, she's making me go again and it is so inconvenient and she's just like justifying it in her head, saying that it's a ceiling, so it's like different from what I did at the temple this morning, and there's just no justification for what she's putting me through. So I want to teach y'all about some compromises. Compromising is where you it's where you like kind of make sacrifices for another person and the other person is also making sacrifices for you, so the exchange is like mutually beneficial. So with me, I'm like the master of compromising because my brother had to he wanted to use my car to go get some coffee, and I, and I remembered that I had some coffee packets in my bag from when I worked in the hotel, and so I grabbed a coffee packet, and turns out that wasn't enough. He also needed 2 sugar packets, and so I got the 2 sugar packets, and I think I've appeased him because he stopped bothering me, and hopefully it stays that way. And this got me thinking about a show, The Big Bang Theory, and in the show, like, they constantly, Sheldon's like always trying to constantly get his way, and like, I guess like throughout the series, it's about getting Sheldon to like actually compromise and not always get his way. And an example of this is like the thermostat. Sheldon always wants it like ridiculously cold, and it won't compromise on anything to do with the thermostat. It has to be his way. And also like there's no compromising Sheldon's spot on the couch. It's his spot, and it's like the perfect angle at the TV, and that perfect way to feel the draft coming through the window on a summer's day and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that Sheldon won't compromise. But I do remember one episode where Sheldon, like his girlfriend Amy, actually gets him to make a compromise. It's like when they're going to like this Halloween party. there, Amy wanted to dress up as like a couple, that people recognized, and Sheldon wanted to dress up as it was C-3PO from Star Wars, and she wanted Amy to be R2-D2, and Amy was like, that's not a couple, and Sheldon was like making all kinds of excuses, but in the end they compromised. Sheldon got to be C-3PO, but he had to wear like a wig, and I guess he was wearing like the wig of some other character, so they could be a costume couple. For a few days, the school could talk of little but the attack on Mrs. Norris. Filch kept it fresh on everyone's minds by pacing the spot where she had been attacked, as though he thought the attacker might come back. Harry had seen him scrubbing the message on the wall with Mrs. Scour's all-purpose magical mess remover, but to no effect. The words still gleamed as brightly as ever on the stone. When Filch wasn't guarding the scene of the crime, he was skulking red-eyed through the corridors, longing out all unsuspecting students and trying to put them in attention for things like breathing loudly and looking happy. I'm just reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and it's talking about how Filch is feeling grumpier than ever because of what happened to his cat, and he's taking it out on these students. Ginny Weasley seemed very disturbed by Mrs. Norris's fate. According to Ron, she was a great cat lover, but you hadn't really got to know Mrs. Norris, Ron told her bracingly. Honestly, we're much better off without her. Ginny's lip trembled. Stuff like this doesn't often happen at Hogwarts, Ron assured her. They'll catch the nutter who did it and have him out of here in no time. I just hope he's got time to petrify Filch before he's expelled. I'm only joking, Ron added hastily as Ginny blanched. So this got me thinking about how there's always like a goofy character who's making jokes in these series, like Ron making a joke about how he wants these bad things to happen to the caretaker because of how grumpy he is all the time. The attack had also had an effect on Hermione. It was quite unusual for Hermione to spend a lot of time reading, but she was now doing almost nothing else. Nor could Harry and Ron get much response from her when they asked what she was up to, and not until the following Wednesday did they find out. Harry had been held back in potions where Snape had made him stay behind to scrape tube worms off the desks. After a hurried lunch, he went upstairs to meet Ron in the library and saw Justin Finch Flenchley, the Hufflepuff boy from herbology, coming towards him. Harry had just opened his mouth to say hello when Justin caught sight of him, turned abruptly, and sped off in the opposite direction. Harry found Ron at the back of the library measuring his history of magic homework. Professor Binns had asked for a 3-foot-long composition of the medieval assembly of European wizards. I don't believe it. I'm still 8 inches short, said Ron, furiously letting go of his parchment, which sprang back into a roll. And Hermione's done 4 feet 7 inches, and her writing's tiny. Where is she? Asked Harry, grabbing the tape measure and unrolling his own homework. Somewhere over there, said Ron, pointing along the shelves, looking for another book. I think she's trying to read the whole library before Christmas. Harry told Ron about Justin Finch Flenchley running away from him. Don't know why you care. I thought he was a bit of an idiot, said Ron, scribbling away, making his writing as large as possible. All that rubbish about Lockhart being so great. Hermione emerged from between the bookshelves. She looked irritable and at last seemed ready to talk to them. All the copies of Hogwarts, a History, have been taken out, she said, sitting down next to Harry and Ron. And there's a 2-week waiting list. I wish I hadn't left my copy at home, but I couldn't fit it in my trunk with all the Lockhart books. Why do you want it? Said Harry. The same reason everyone else wants it, said Hermione, to read up on the legend of the Chamber of Secrets. What's that? Said Harry quickly. That's just it, I can't remember, said Hermione, biting her lip. And I can't find the story anywhere else. Hermione, let me read your composition, said Ron desperately, checking his watch. No, I won't, said Hermione, suddenly severe. You've had 10 days to finish it. I only need another 2 inches. Go on. The bell rang. Ron and Hermione led the way to History of Magic, bickering. So this got me thinking about how, like of the 3 characters, it's always like the 2 side characters that are always getting in arguments, like with Ron and Hermione. They're arguing about, like, Ron wants to get some free help on his homework and cheat, and Hermione's like this straight-edged princess, straight-edged goody-goody, and she's not going to let anyone cheat off her homework. The bell rang. Ron and Hermione led the way to History of Magic, bickering. History of Magic was the dullest subject on their timetable. Professor Binns, who taught it, was their only ghost teacher, and the most exciting thing that ever happened in his classes was his entering the room through the blackboard, ancient and shriveled. Many people said he hadn't noticed he was dead. He had simply got up to teach one day and left his body behind him in an armchair in front of the staff room fire. His routine had not varied in the slightest since. Today was as boring as ever. Professor Binns opened his notes and began to read in a flat drone, like an old vacuum cleaner, until nearly everyone in this class was in a deep stupor, occasionally coming around long enough to copy down a name or date, then falling asleep again. He had been speaking for half an hour when something happened that had never happened before. Hermione put up her hand. So this got me thinking about how to engage your audience, or in this case your students. You need to inclusive language, include them in the conversation. Like, did you know that this is the most significant historical event in the wizarding world? Like, this inclusive language and this engagement, this asking questions. And also, I know that trying to persuade someone or something is really inclusive. It's not just about transferring information, it's about convincing them of something, of some kind of argument that's really controversial or something like that. Professor Binns, glancing up in the middle of a deadly dull lecture on the International Warlock Convention of 1289, looked amazed. Miss Granger, Professor, I was wondering if you could tell us anything about the Chamber of Secrets, said Hermione in a clear voice. Dean Thomas, who had been sitting with his mouth hanging open, gazing out of the window, jerked out of his trance. Lavender Brown's head came up off her arms, and Neville's elbow slipped off his desk. Professor Binns blinked. My subject is history of magic, he said in his dry, wheezy voice. I deal with facts, Miss Granger, not myths and legends. He cleared his throat with a small noise like chalk snapping, and continued. In September of that year, a subcommittee of Sardinian sorcerers. He stuttered to a halt. Hermione's hand was waving in the air again. Miss Grant. He says her name incorrectly, and it kind of shows that he's not really engaging his audience. Like, he's not even saying their names correctly, and he's not engaging them at all. And that's why everyone's kind of falling asleep. But it could also be because they're just not interested in the history of magic. But moving on. Please, sir, don't legends always have a basis in fact? Professor Binns was looking at her in such amazement. Harry was sure no student had ever interrupted him before, alive or dead. Well, said Professor Binns slowly. Yes, one could argue that, I suppose. He peered at Hermione as though he had never seen a student properly before. However, the legend of which you speak is such a very sensational, even ludicrous tale. But the whole class was now hanging on Professor Binns' every word. He looked dimly at them all. Every face turned to his. Harry could tell he was completely thrown by such an unusual show of interest. Oh, very well, he said slowly. Let me see. The Chamber of Secrets. You all know, of course, that Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 years ago. The precise date is uncertain. By the 4 greatest witches and wizards of the age. The 4 schoolhouses are named after them. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. They built this castle together, far from prying Muggle eyes, for it was an age when magic was feared by common people, and witches and wizards suffered much persecution. He paused, gazed blearily around the room, and continued. For a few years, the founders worked in harmony together, seeking out youngsters who showed signs of magic and bringing them to the castle to be educated. But then disagreement sprang up between them. A rift began to grow between Slytherin and the others. Slytherin wished to be more selective about the students admitted to Hogwarts. He believed that magical learning should be kept within all magic families. He disliked taking students of Muggle parentage, believing them to be untrustworthy. After a while, there was a serious argument on the subject between Slytherin and Gryffindor, and Slytherin left the school. So this got me thinking about like how this was inspired by like real life events, like in like 1900s there was a lot of like racial segregation, like in schools the black people couldn't use like the same water fountains or the same restrooms or eat in the same cafeteria, sit in the same area as the other white students. And there's also like on the bus, Rosa Perkins was told to move to the back of the bus because there was a white person who wanted to sit where she was sitting. And I think it was like this that started some kind of black movement that led to Martin Luther King speech on how it's not about the color of your skin but the content of your character. So this was obviously inspired by real life events. But anyway, let's continue. Professor Binns paused again. pursing his lips, looking like a wrinkled old tortoise. Reliable historical sources tell us this much, he said, but these honest facts have been obscured by the fanciful legend of the Chamber of Secrets. The story goes that Slytherin had built a hidden chamber in the castle of which the other founders knew nothing. Slytherin, according to the legend, sealed the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. The heir alone would be able to unseal the Chamber of Secrets, unleash the horror within, and use it to purge the school of all who were unworthy to study magic. There was silence as he finished telling the story, but it wasn't the usual sleepy silence that filled Professor Binns' classes. There was unease in the air as everyone continued to watch him, hoping for more. Professor Binns looked faintly annoyed. The whole thing is arrant nonsense, of course, he said. Naturally, the school has been searched for evidence of such a chamber many times by the most learned witches and wizards. It does not exist, a tale told to frighten the gullible. Hermione's hand was back in the air. Sir, what exactly do you mean by the horror within the chamber? That is believed to be some sort of monster, which the heir of Slytherin alone can control, said Professor Binns in his dry, reedy voice. The class exchanged nervous looks. I tell you, the thing does not exist, said Professor Binns, shuffling his notes. There is no chamber and no monster. But, sir, said Seamus Finnegan, if the chamber can only be opened by Slytherin's true heir, no one else would be able to find it, would they? Nonsense, oh, Flaherty, said Professor Binns in an aggravated tone. If a long succession of Hogwarts headmasters and headmistresses haven't found the thing, well, that's all I got for today. Reading some Harry Potter and learning how to be the best storyteller. And that's all I got. Goodbye.